Next, we have Mr. Deb Mukherjee. Dr. Deb Mukherjee uses a data-driven approach in working towards India's switch to electric. A firm advocate of Make in India, his guidance has been instrumental in the birth of Rage Plus and Rage Plus Frost, Omega Seiki, indigenously developed electric three-vehicle cargo vehicles running on clean energy.
Okay, Rucha, can I start? Yeah, Chelsea, can I start? Yeah, Chelsea, can I start?
Yes, sir, you can start.
Okay, thank you very much, Rucha, and thank you very much for having me in the session. It's a great pleasure to be part of this very interesting and very relevant topic, being in the auto industry. So, as previous speaker, Mr. Sanjay Mehta, outlined the policy and what are the challenges that lie ahead. So I would like to do a bit of a deep dive into the economic benefits, and also what could be the right way, what is the scientific approach or a proper way to go about this whole recycling business. See, as we know, in India, we believe that there are going to be two major game changing events happening in very near future. One is the transition to electric mobility from IC engines to electric. Already government policies are there, and various benefits, subsidies, etc. are promoting it. And second game changing event is going to be the vehicle scrappage policy, which has been in works for quite some time, and now it has been announced. And we are sure that very soon it is going to be notified, and we will have the policy in our hands. Now, just a little brief, as Mr. Mehta has already outlined, that according to new policy, the commercial vehicles of more than 15 years and passenger vehicles of more than 20 years will have to be mandatorily scrapped if they don't pass the fitness and emission tests. And government vehicles will have to be discarded after 15 years. So that's a kind of promotion from government side. So let's see what are the economic benefits first. An HDFC Bank study estimates the market for vehicle scrappage and recycling at US$6 billion a year. So that's going to be a very significant amount of money that this recycling will bring in. If the policy is defined well, 9 million vehicles could go off-road by fiscal 2021 and 28 million by 2025, largely comprising of two-wheelers. Well, 2021, I don't see that happening because of lockdown and others, but certainly we could be on target to meet 2025 targets. And we have seen our honorable minister has been very relentless and very persistent with this policy, as well as the switch to electric vehicles. So it will reduce carbon dioxide emission by 17% and cut particulate matter by 24%. Obviously, we all know automobile is one of the major contributor to the environmental pollution. Also, it will save $8 million of barrels of oil imports. So that's a big indirect benefit. Then we see 30% boost to the Indian automotive industry from the current 4.5 lakh turnover. We are estimating that the turnover will become more than double to 10 lakh crore over next few years. Then the biggest benefit is that the scrap materials will be used in manufacturing of automotive parts, See, today there are a lot of shortages of the basic materials that go into automotive manufacturing. As we know, automotive, whether it is car or LCV or HCV or a three-wheeler, these are all very, very material intensive products. All kind of materials, steel, non-ferrous, plastic, rubber, electronics, electrical, polymers, etc., are used in manufacturing vehicle. So all these materials are, many of them are not available in India. So if we recycle and reclaim, and we'll talk about it later in the presentation. So we expect a cost reduction as much as 30 to 40%. Well, all of that may not be passed on to consumer or customers, but there is definitely going to be a big cost advantage to the OEMs. Also, it will put a pressure on OEMs to promote new technologies with better mileage of vehicles, attract new investments to the tune of 10,000 crores and create as many as 35,000 jobs. This is a government paper, but I do feel that the job creation will be significantly more than this, because the whole supply chain involves many direct as well as indirect jobs, like the transporter, handlers, the scrap dealers, etc., etc. So the whole supply chain will have to be set up. Let's see the scale of the business. There are 17 lakh medium and heavy commercial vehicles that are older than 15 years without any valid fitness certificate. 51 lakh light motor vehicles older than 20 years, and 34 lakh light motor vehicles older than 15 years. So that's the kind of population we are talking about, which is fit for scrapping even today if the policy is enacted today. So this entire population should be going into scrappage. So we see an enormous amount of vehicle population which will go into scrappage once the policy gets enacted. Also, the average age of commercial vehicles is over 10 years, and the private vehicle is 10 to 15 years. We tend to use, we sell the vehicle, then the vehicle goes into a second life, etc., etc. Now, coming to the material reclaim, and just a broad estimate looking at the steel and the non-ferrous material like aluminum, these are the two major materials that we foresee which will be reclaimed from scrappage. And we do see a scrap recovery
Actually,
of
we
something
are
like,
joining.
yeah, Chelsea?
Nothing, so you can continue.
Okay, we see something like 10 million metric tons of scrap coming immediately, and right in the beginning, we are estimating a median of 50% of the population to be coming for scrap. So with that, also we see something like 10 million tons of steel coming into the market, as well as half a million ton of aluminum. So the value of this, at a very conservative estimate, is something like $3 billion. So this starting, at the very beginning, we don't see the entire population of vehicles will come into scrappage. But as the time progresses, as the supply chain gets installed and the whole industry matures, we do see that this policy will be enacted in its entirety by a law, and the vehicles will have to be mandatorily scrapped. So we do see an industry scale of something like 6 billion US dollar annually. So that's the kind of um, industry business value of scrapping of vehicles is foreseen. Something like $6 billion of worth of industry will be created just by scrapping of vehicles. Just to give you a comparison, in Indian scenario, the foundry industry market size currently is about $19 billion. It's a very fragmented market with lots of unorganized players, and there are regions like in Punjab, Jalandhar, Mandi Gobindgarh, then Satara in Maharashtra, etc. There are pockets where these kind of foundries exist, and they buy a lot of scrap and for remelting, etc. So this whole industry will have to undergo a complete changeover and modernize and use the scrap which will be available in the Indian market. They will also have to increase their capacities substantially India currently imports 9 million tons of scrap. This is the data from the government sources, 9 million tons of scrap. So this will be definitely saved. As I just showed you, around 10 million tons of steel itself will be coming into the market. So we can, save that precious foreign exchange. Now let's see what is happening today. You see, the present vehicle scrapping system in India is practically non-existent. There is no formal industry as such which scraps the or recycles the car. Most of the cars, after selling multiple times, they end up in junkyards. Parts like tires, plastic parts, electric parts, etc., are sold to the markets where they are opened up and dismantled, and components are taken out, and then they are recycled in a very crude manner. So this is a very dangerous as well as wasteful kind of activity, because you are wasting a lot of energy, you are wasting a lot of human effort, as well as you are creating a lot of pollution problem, because vehicles have a lot of heavy metals like lead and palladium, vanadium, etc. So those, if not handled well, are very, very hazardous to human health. This is just an example. You see the one of the scrap yard in Delhi, the non-metallic fraction that remains after the metals are discarded, and it constitutes roughly about 25% of the weight of the vehicle. These are the plastic, rubber, and other non-metallic parts. So they are just disposed of in garbage dumps. See, the scrap management in India as it is a huge problem. And we know that cities like Delhi and Mumbai, etc., we are facing huge shortage of garbage dumps and recycling and incinerators to reprocess this material. So this is a very, very risky and very hazardous scenario. Let's see now what is happening in global markets. How do they do, and what could be the benchmark for us in India? Globally, auto part recyclers, dismantlers, remanufacturers, and material recyclers, shredders, is a very organized industry, and it is backed by regulators. The regulations are in place where the OEMs are, made responsible for reclaiming a particular value of material once they produce the car. It becomes their responsibility. So the complete supply chain for recycling is in place. And today, over 75% of automotive material, primarily the metals, are profitably recycled via parts reuse and parts and components remanufacturing. So this is very important, remanufacturing, and ultimately by scrap processing, that is shredding industry, and then the whole material goes for remelting, typically aluminium, zinc, and steel. Remanufacturing is a very interesting business, particularly in the US. And rebuilding of certain components of dismantled vehicles are done by dismantlers or by repair shops. There are very organized factories and businesses, they deal in that. Many automotive components are remanufactured. For example, the data shows that almost 90% of replacement starters and alternators are remanufactured. So this is very important. You see, starters, electrical parts like starters, motors, alternators, they use a lot of non-ferrous materials like copper, nickel, etc. They get reused. Other automotive parts that are typically remanufactured include engines, transmission, brake system, and water pumps. Since the life of these parts is quite longer than the car, so they get taken out and they are reused. So let's talk about the scientific approach to the vehicle scrapping as the topic of my talk today. We need to install a reclaiming industry instead of a scrapping industry. See, we need to have this whole reclaiming of all the precious materials that go into manufacturing a vehicle, and we need to be able to profitably reclaim it. That is the whole approach that we would like to have in India. Need to manage this industry value chain by using technology. See, the technology is going to play a major part here, right from the vehicle tracking system. Now government has instituted the digital number plates, the high security number plates, which are easy to track, and next few years the RTOs database, etc., can track the vehicle. So we will know, where my vehicle has gone after I resold, and where does it end up. So the vehicle can be easily tracked. Technologies like data analytics, blockchain need to manage the scrapping industry. See, this is the complete the value chain or the life of the vehicle can be tracked from, as we say, cradle to grave, using the technologies. So what I'm talking about here is the efficiency mapping of the value chain. The basic activities which are part of this recycling industry are dismantling, then remanufacturing, then shredding, and ultimately remelting the metals. So we need to map the each of these activities and see what are the efficiency, what are the value that we add, and the value that we get out of this. And this is how we will be able to institute a very scientific way of doing the recycling. This is shown here. You see, what happens is when the car is taken for scrapping, first we have to drain out the fluid, the brake fluid, the engine oils and engine coolants, etc. Now this have to be disposed of in a very, very safe manner, and not discharged just in a drain or ground or something. So there has to be a zero discharge in the entire process of the recycling. Then the parts are dismantled, like seats are taken out, the powertrain is taken out, all the parts, fitted parts are taken out, and the body goes for pressing, which is using big presses, hammers, etc. And the metals get shredded, and they form the metal blocks, which are then sold to the melting foundries, etc. And now these are very prime grade material. Like auto industry uses very prime grades of cold rolled steel, hot rolled steel, alloy steels, high tensile steel, galvanized steel, etc. And these are of very high value, unlike some of the products which are not so high grade. So the value extraction out of these materials to the scrap dealers is quite high, and it has to be done carefully. And the other parts like rubber, tires, plastic, etc., are sent separately for recycling. So this is the complete value chain that I am showing here. And this chart shows just a broad view of what goes on in manufacturing the car and what goes on in dismantling the car. So ideally we should be net neutral, in terms of our energy used in building the car, and we should see it as a reverse of assembly. But that's the ideal case. It doesn't happen that way, but we should aim for the technology in a way that we reclaim maximum of it by putting in minimum energy, so that in terms of energy usage we have to be least wasteful. Now
Sorry to
coming to
interrupt
the,
you, sir. You have 5 minutes left for the presentation, so I would like you to.
yes, I'm speeding up. Electric vehicle is the new phenomena that is going to happen very soon, and that will be a new challenge when those vehicles get to the end of their life, because the battery, particularly the lithium-ion battery, has a lot of challenges of reclaiming, etc. So I know I'm just coming to the end of my presentation. A very efficient supply chain needs to be set up for vehicle scrapping. Government will have to play a role here as the part of the policy. Large amount of space needs to be allocated. Financial incentives and resources for recycling industries will have to be provided. Let's see once the policy is out, what do they come up with. But looking at the way government has been taking it up, I'm very sure that they will be very, very industry friendly. We have talked about efficiency, effectiveness, and the energy efficiency. So it's a very big impact to the whole of the society. It generates high skilled jobs. It's not just picking up scraps and bits of scrap here and there in a very unorganized and dangerous way. This vehicle recycling is a very scientific way, and using high technology, it generates high skilled jobs to manage this business. It has a multiplier effect with thousands of direct and indirect employments, and a positive impact on environment, safety, and clean living for a very large population. So therefore, the economic spillovers are huge. It is not just the $6 billion or whatever we are saying, which is directly coming into the business, but there are much more indirect benefits, as we call the economic spillover. So for an activity to be sustainable, it must be economically attractive and environmentally friendly. It must provide a beneficial service to the society in a safe and responsible manner. A sustainable operation is a target we need to strive to attain as the world faces material shortages, increased costs, and more stringent environmental regulations. So this is what, something that we have learned from the current pandemic, that we need to conserve resources and we need to be sensitive to the environment. So with this, I conclude my presentation, and I'll be happy to take questions, if any.
Everyone can post their questions in the question box. It's right below the chat. We will be handling questions from there. Question box.
So we have a question from
We have
Mr.
first question from Balaji DC. Does the manufacturers define the EOL?
Yeah, the end of
Does the manufacturers define the EOL for 2, 3, 4?
The policy defines the end of life, that it has to be 15 years, and more than 15 years, the passenger vehicles will have to go for fitness refitness certificate. So if the fitness is not given by the authority, then they will have to go mandatorily for the scrappage of the vehicle. So same way for 2 and 3-wheeler, manufacturer typically give a warranty. There is no life defined as such, that after this life you have to scrap it. It is not that way in India right now, but the scrappage policy defines it. And once the notifications come, we will know more in detail.
Next, we have a question from Shitish Gideal. He asked, Sir, can you comment on a correlation between ELV recycling and India's transition to electric mobility?
Yeah, you see, electric mobility, as I said, is a phenomena which is going to happen in India soon. It is happening globally. In India, it has already started with 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers. And next, we expect 4-wheeler, especially in the cargo segment, will happen soon. So government has very ambitious targets. Like by 2030, they want almost 80% of 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers to be converted to electric, drives. But all that also needs a lot of infrastructure to be in place. So once the electric vehicles, the electric vehicle is significantly different from the IC engine vehicle. The basic vehicle architecture is completely different, as we know. There are very few moving parts, and most of the parts are electrical or electronics into it, and also a lot of software goes into the modern vehicles nowadays. So to dismantle an electric vehicle, will need a different supply chain or technology. We will have to take out the battery first, which is the for example, the lithium ion battery has the life of typical life for automotive is 2000 cycle, which is about, let's say, about 3 years. So after that the battery doesn't die. The battery is fit for secondary use, like stationary use of inverters or stationary storage. So that battery needs to be handled carefully. Then all the other electrical parts like motor, controller, and the electronics, that has to be taken out separately, and the recycling of the remaining vehicle will have to be done. So unlike the engine, the IC engine vehicle, which are more complex, engine has hundreds of moving parts, then various alloys, various non-ferrous parts, etc. Electric vehicle that way is relatively simpler in terms of construction, but it also has a huge amount of high value and very rare earth elements like lithium, cobalt, etc., and they need to be handled in a very, very careful and designated way. So you can't do any shortcuts in case of EVs. So that needs specific technology to do.
Next, we have a question from Nishant Pawar. I have two questions. First, when
Yeah.
you say vehicle scrappage will save 8 million tons of oil in a year, can you please elaborate? Secondly, can you elaborate the use of blockchain in vehicle industry?
You see, the whole first I will take the question on the blockchain and the data analysis. See, the whole vehicle scrapping means we need to track the vehicle right from the day it is manufactured. Then it passes through many hands. Typically in India, typically 3 to 4 times the vehicle gets sold, and before, if you're talking about a life of 15 to 20 years, and then it will end up in the recycling yard. So the whole vehicle needs to be tracked properly, and then out of that vehicle, what all materials are reclaimed, where are those materials going, and what is the end use of that. See, the aim is not to just shred a vehicle. Aim is to reclaim as much as possible, right, in a very economical way. So these are the technologies which track the vehicle. The data can be analyzed, and you have millions of cars. How will you do it if you do not have a big data analytic IT platform with you? So that would be done by the OEM, also the regulatory agencies like RTOs, and the recycling company is going to be part of it. So you can check that out of your car, what material was reclaimed, how much of it got reused, and where did it go. So the whole end of life use can be tracked by data analytics. Now, and what was the first question? The oil. Yeah, you see, India's import on oil is well known. We spend almost 80% of our foreign exchange on imports. This is our biggest import. So once we have these recycling in place, we will have more efficient vehicles. And as the vehicle gets old, the consumption of oil, petrol, whatever the fuel is, it goes high because the engine is wearing off, the parts are wearing out, and we have once those are replaced by newer vehicles, obviously the efficiency of the vehicles will be higher. So that is how it is estimated that the more efficient vehicles will replace these old gas guzzlers, etc. Now, for example, we have the BS6 engine, which is much more efficient than the earlier version. So we will have more efficient engines replacing these old 20-year, 30-year. In India, as there are many old vehicles, even 40, 50-year-old vehicles also get reconditioned and they are used, but they are very uneconomical to run, and also their consumption of fuel is high.
As we are lacking of time, we will take the questions later on. I have posted Mr. Deb's email ID, so you can directly contact him and post the questions there. We were so pleased to have you on our stage. Thank you for being a part of us.
My pleasure, Rucha. Thank you very much for having me.
We will be ending with this session. The next session will begin shortly.